People often ask me what type of gear they should buy for their home studio setup. In this video, we're going to talk about the right choice of microphone for you. In case you're thinking, why would I listen to the Guitarist for so-and-so when it comes to mic choices and studio gear? What does he know? Well, I did actually study audio engineering for 2 years, and I've been working as an audio engineer for live and studio since 1997. So with that in mind, you're building your home studio up and you're thinking about mics, preamps, speakers, audio interfaces, and all that good stuff. What do you get? Well, as I said in the intro, this video will cover microphones. But in order to understand the basics of that, let's just go over a few things real quick. The audio signal chain, or the audio signal flow, is the path an audio signal like your voice or my guitar takes from the source to your ears. In other words, your voice will go through a bunch of stages when being recorded. From your mouth, through the microphone, to the cable, to the preamp, and on and on and on. And finally, out of the speakers or headphones into someone's ears. Got that? What I want you to understand is just how important all these elements are in the recording process. Each one of these pieces your voice goes through can enhance or ruin the original audio coming out of your mouth. So, if I took your amazing voice and put it through a $20 mic, I'd be doing a disservice to your voice because I'd be degrading its quality. Similarly, if I took your amazing voice and put it through a $20,000 mic, but then I used a $10 cable and a $50 preamp, well, what a waste of $20,000, since the rest of the gear is just degrading the quality of your voice and the microphone. The point of all of this is that every piece in your audio signal chain has to help the rest. It all matters. It doesn't mean you have to spend $100,000 to have a good studio rig. I just want you to be aware that spending a shitload of money on one piece of gear and then buying another piece of gear that's complete crap is kind of a waste of money. Figure out what your budget is and then buy the right tools for the job. Great. Now that we know that, let's chat about mics. Now I'm not going to dive deep into everything because I want to keep the video short and to the point. If you need more info on one thing or another, I can always make another video. Just let me know in the comments right after you like and subscribe. So, what do mics actually do? Well, mics take audio signal, waves of audio in the air, and turn those into electrical signals. So basically what happens is when I'm talking or singing, I'm creating pressure, waves of pressure in the air with my voice. And the microphone takes those waves of pressure of sound and turns them into electricity. There are 3 basic types of mics you're going to be using in the studio: dynamic, condensers, and ribbon mics. The only difference between all of these is exactly how they turn your audio signal into an electrical signal. For our purpose, we're going to leave it at that. Like I said, we're keeping it simple. So just know this. In order of sensitivity, dynamic mics are the least sensitive and therefore they are used mostly, but not exclusively, on loud audio signals. For example, drums, loud guitar and bass amps, horns, anything loud. However, I'm not saying you can't use the other kind of mics on these loud instruments. I'm just saying these are the most common types of mics to use on loud instruments. Ribbon mics can be sensitive or not very sensitive, depending on if they're active or passive. Condenser mics are the most sensitive, and so you'd use them on audio signals that aren't as loud. For example, your voice, or an acoustic guitar, or cymbals, any stringed instruments in general, like ukuleles, banjos, all that good stuff. Mics also usually have different frequency responses. So what that means is, let's say your voice is very bass heavy and you use a Shure SM58, a very standard live vocal mic. What's going to happen is, and you can see it in this chart, that amazing natural bass you have in your voice isn't going to come through that well. See the reddish part? How instead of being flat, the bass frequencies are kind of rolled off? That means they're getting lower in level, so we won't hear them that well out of this specific microphone. That's why if someone wants to hear that amazing bass in their voice, it'd be a better idea to use an SM7B. See how that red part, the bass, is now sort of flat? That means it's going to come through better in the recording. It's not being lowered in level by the microphone. That's also why you'll see so many radio personalities and podcasters using this industry standard mic. Those were only 2 examples of frequency response charts. Every mic comes with one to tell you how they react to audio. What frequencies do they cut, what frequencies they boost, etc. Now, there are also polar patterns for each mic. What the polar pattern does is tell you which direction the mic is getting the most audio from. I'll leave a link below to a really cool article about the different types you can find. Honestly though, for simple home studio purposes, any mic that can give you a cardioid pattern as an option should do the job perfectly. Unless you're looking for some specific polar patterns to try out some cool stuff like mid-side recording or Olsen wing recording. But that article is good. You should check it out. Might give you some great ideas. In fact, I'll leave 2 articles in the description. Really good stuff. Why am I teaching you all of this? Because before you spend any money, I want you to know which mic to get and for what purpose. Plan on getting the right mic for what you need. Don't get a mic because I told you it was good, or someone else told you some other mic was good. Get a mic because you know it's the right one for the job and it's at the right price. Again, think audio chain here, right? If your budget is $2,000, don't spend $1,900 on a mic and get everything else super cheap. Plan accordingly. All these pieces of the puzzle affect each other. Also, another piece of advice, just on a business level, you don't have to follow this if you're just doing it for fun, but on a business level, put in what you know you can make back. If you spend $20,000 on building up your studio, have a business plan on how to make that money back and then some. So back to mics. Now that you have some ideas about how mics work and what they do, you should really research different mics online. In the descriptions below all my videos, I write exactly what mics I use. I also recommend you listen to mic shootouts on YouTube. That's when someone records mics one-to-one and you get to hear the difference without being there yourself. It's a great tool. Do the research, the videos are out there. But before we leave, here are a few more basic guidelines. Play around with them and experiment as much as you like. These are not rules by any means. They're just industry standard suggestions for studio recording. For vocals, you would usually use a large diaphragm condenser mic. I'd recommend using a pop filter as you can see in the picture. That helps with any popping and plosive sounds like the letter P. If you don't know what I'm talking about, put your hand in front of your mouth like this and say, "Piper paid the Pope," right? That air you feel on your hand every time you say the letter P, that's what your mic diaphragm gets hit with hard. And it can be a bit overwhelming and may sound really bad in the recording. That's where pop filters come into play by helping reduce the plosive energy. There are many different ways to record acoustic guitars. It really depends what tone you're going for and how many you're going to be recording. But in general, whenever I record guitars for myself or in sessions for other producers, I've always seen everyone use at least 2 mics. The sound that you get from here is going to be very different than the sound that you're going to get from here. So many times you'll see people using 2 mics, one on each area, and then they blend the 2 sounds to get the tone they're shooting for. If they want a more stringy sound, they boost the mic in this area. If they want a fuller body sound, they boost the mic in this area. My personal favorite for recording acoustic instruments is the XY pattern. This is where you use 2 mics exactly 90 degrees from each other, so there is minimal phasing. And in this way, you get a beautiful stereo image as well as different tones from the microphones themselves. In this pick from the Bailando tutorial, I'm using 2 Shure SM81s in this configuration. There are many techniques to mic acoustic guitars, banjos, ukuleles. It's really all about trial and error. So, after you watch this video, the whole thing, if you want more info on these techniques, I'll leave yet another link below to a cool article with pics. Oh, and one more thing about mics and quality. When I originally started recording the acoustics with the XY technique, I bought a couple of cheap microphones. And after one recording, I returned them and bought the SM81s. The reason for this was because the cheap microphones were way too noisy. So if you pumped up the level, you could hear this in the background. Every electrical piece of gear has some electrical noise to it. This is also referred to as self-noise, and it's the signal that the gear, in this case the microphone, produces on its own just by being plugged in. You want mics that have very low level of noise. That's one more reason to invest in a good mic and not a cheap one. A good mic should have a very low level of noise to it. Back to some miking info. If we're having a conversation about miking drums, then you're looking to invest a lot of money in a bunch of mics and preamps. So I feel like that's a different kind of video altogether. But just be aware that there are many different ways to mic drums. These days, you would most likely want to use anywhere between 8 and 16 different mics, dynamic, condensers, even ribbon mics, in order to capture the recording of a good set of drums in a good studio. But you can also do it with just 1 or 2 mics in the room, and that's it. Like I said, there are many different techniques to get these different sounds. Do your research and figure out what you need. Heads up though, it's going to be an investment if you want to get good mics and good gear. Just to give you an example, my boy Jake Hayden, drummer for bands like Beth Ditto and Missing Persons, recently built his studio up to an amazing level. He's currently using 15 mics on his kit, including some room mics, and has a slew of great vintage preamps for those mics. I'll leave a detailed list of his gear in the description, as well as some contact info in case you want to reach out to him to record drums for you, or to ask him any questions you might have. So let's wrap it up. We learned about the importance of planning your audio signal chain, we learned about mic types, we learned about polar patterns as well as frequency responses, noise levels, and miking techniques. If you liked the video, you know what to do as I mentioned earlier. Do your research, get the right mics for you, and record some amazing music. See you next week. Is there anything in my teeth? There we go. Focus. Focus. It'll go through a bunch of stages. Might, but probably go through a bunch of stages. Do your research. Figure out what you want to do. Did I say it right?
You spoke it.
Unique New York. Unique New York. It's the signal and what happened here. I'm not sure. It's configuration. Talk like a robot. For vocals, you would usually use a large diaphragm condenser microphone. Like your voice or my guitar takes from the sauce. The sauce. It takes it from the sauce. Okay. Right.